Hello fellow Stalkers, thanks for stopping by, and welcome back to Stalker 2 Mysteries. Before we start anything, I must preface that this video contains massive spoilers for the entire story of Stalker 2 and its characters. If you want to experience the game and story for yourself, I recommend you come back to this video at a later time. You have been warned. Still here? Good. Today we will be talking about Stalker 2's Spark faction, but not just within gameplay. We are going to talk about everything about Spark, including theories, origins, and their impact on the zone and the outside world, along with a timeline on their existence. My research isn't completely perfect, and Anomalous Dugout has done a way better video on this topic, though I have some new things to share, and quick points he mentioned that I believe deserve more scrutiny. Stalker 2's lore, while leaving a lot of loose ends, doesn't really have enough people exploring it compared to the other games. With that being said, join me as we explore the entire story of the paramilitary turned cult Spark faction. To start off, let's define Spark. What is Spark? How were they formed? What are they known for, and what is their role in the story? First, let's rule out some myths and misconceptions. There is a belief that Spark was formed by former members of Clear Sky. This is false, as just about every member of Clear Sky has died during the push to the CNPP to kill Strelok. Secondly, Iskra and Spark are technically not the same faction. You can think of it as the Iskra Spark name being a licensing sort of thing, as the Spark faction are ragtag soldiers, not a scientific investigation team anymore. Also, their HQ is not STC Malachite. Malachite is another organization that Spark is allied with and seems to chill out with most of the time and help out due to their past relations. Their base was likely supposed to be in the Burnt Forest, as that location was definitely meant to have way more lore tied to it, as there are so many locations that could have been used, such as Orbita Station, Krug Antenna Complex, Helicopter Base, or the Fairy Tale Pioneer Camp. Their actual HQ is still a mystery, as we will explain later throughout this video. Now that we're on the same page, let's explain where this faction came from. A mobile science lab is dropped south of Yanov Station. The horrific events of the Brain Scorcher are a thing of the past. It was shut off. It seems that now, the Psi missions are gone, and the military immediately dropped off a lab close to the center of the zone to study it even closer. A big risk, but worth the gamble. A gamble Professor Herman and Ozerski were willing to take and sacrifice their well-beings for. Not long after a few days of staying in a can of concrete and metal, cowering and researching in fear, stalkers began to show up out of curiosity. The locals were just as dumbfounded as the scientists here. This area had only been inhabited by the stalkers for about a week or two, but seeing scientists in portable labs is nothing new in the zone. It's just another way of profit to the stalkers. A small squad of them shows up with the same mindsets, but seem to be more invested. Led by Topol, Stalkers Mace, Snake, and Spirit strike a deal with the scientists and become their errand boys, while being taken care of and well paid in return. Some members even promise an official entry permit into the zone to conduct more research. It is not known when, but another Stalker shows up, Novikov, Clear Sky's technician. This could add to the list of ties to the Clear Sky faction that Spark has, though I doubt it's anything significant. Other than that, Novikov mentions that he created the CS-3A armor. If Novikov is really one of the few craftsmen in the zone stitching armor together, then this means he could have also been the original designer of Spark's armor in Heart of Chernobyl, but we can come back to that later. These stalkers, after doing enough work for the professors, eventually become the Iskra Scientific Research and Investigation Team, the first quote-unquote Spark Group, a translation of Iskra. They are provided with high-end gear and resources and become an absolute unit when it comes to dangerous scientific expeditions, or retrieving artifacts and entering intermittent psi missions. For now, this marks the end of the humble beginnings of a squad of stalkers assisting scientists for pay, and the start of a bright future for a well-experienced and protected team of scientific stalkers. If only it stayed that way. Though we will dive into Stalker 2 Spark in a moment, for now I want to scrutinize Spark itself and dive into the changes they make, mainly in armor. There are a total of 7 existing Spark armors in Stalker 2, though only 4 are obtainable. Sorry Spark Exoskeleton and SP99, maybe in the DLC hopefully. These 7 armors are the PSZ-5I Hawk, PSZ-9I Falcon, SSP-100I Survey, Seva-I Suit, and 2 unnamed suits only worn by NPCs, the Spark Exoskeleton, Spark PSZ Exoskeleton Hybrid, and the Spark SSP-99 Ecologist suit. All these suits have a similar theme of cyan urban camo being the main takeaway of it. But why is this the case? Well, there are a couple reasons. Being suits mainly for research, there is no real need for tactics against non-humanoid enemies, though this is probably not the case, as the suits in Stalker 2 are designed for combat in mind, ruling out the neglect for tactics. Another reason could be a recycling of Clear Sky equipment. It might be a bit of a stretch, but it is a possibility. After all, one of Clear Sky's armor makers are on their side. My personal theory on why Spark of all factions is blue ties into the Ecologist's origins in Oblivion Lost, Stalker's beginnings. Back during SOC's development, Ecologist Stalkers were an actual NPC you can encounter, though their model's origins were always a mystery, whether it be a placeholder, actual Ecologist Stalker suits, or Sunrise mercenary suits. We don't know. There were 2 variants of these, an all-blue one, a blue one with black parts on some of its protective parts, and that's really it. Could this be what GSC took inspiration from for Spark's visuals? Could be, but I honestly doubt that. But it's just a little silly theory I think is worth toying with. Now let's dive into each armor and their descriptions. It is important to note that these suits are all standard equipment of Sparkers as of Heart of Chernobyl's period in the timeline, likely being 2021 as Iskra was found in 2012. PSZ-5I Hawk, a PSZ-5 army suit, modernized by Novikov. The army standards do not include zone-specific protection, obviously, so the armor needs some serious tune-ups. A PSZ-5 series army suit, modernized by Novikov. The army standards do not include zone-specific protection, obviously, so the armor needed some serious tune-ups. PSZ-9I Falcon. Guerrilla warfare in the zone is an entire art on its own, and this suit is the creation of those who have mastered it. A Sparker version of one of the most efficient armored suits across this side of the perimeter. SSP-100I Survey. A prototype SSP-100, modified for Spark Stalkers. The basic armored vest was replaced with a stronger one, significantly improving the soldier's survival chances. Seva-I Suit. A common gripe with the Seva suit revolves on its insufficient level of protection offered by its integrated bulletproof vest. The upgraded Spark version seeks to eliminate this issue. The last 3 suits lack an actual description, unfortunately, so we will not be mentioning them. The weapons used by Spark are a mix of Western and Soviet-era firearms. They don't seem to have any preference when it comes to weaponry. With all that being set in stone, we will now discuss the chronology of Spark or Iskra past 2012. The timeline becomes a bit muddy here, as we don't really have any concrete dates here, yet we do know what happened in the span of 9 years before Heart of Chernobyl. Basically, one day a stalker named Marshall wakes up in the Jupiter scientific bunker, We have no clue what his origin was, but he ended up joining the original Iskra team with Topol and the rest. One day upon an expedition, he finds a safe route into a new area that has likely been untouched by the locals, the chemical plant. It was likely surrounded by anomalies at the time, but other than that, we don't really know why it wasn't found by any other stalkers before 2020. As a token of gratitude from Marshall to the scientists, he shows them and the Iskra team the route to the chemical plant, suggesting they should use this huge complex with ample protection as their new base of operations. The whole group, including the scientists, agree, pack their things, and move to the chemical plant. This is when the name Spark started to be used instead of its Ukrainian translation, and the first real Spark group was formed. Though I will still call them Iskra for now, as they weren't 100% known as Spark at this time, and I want to separate it from the Spark faction that was soon to come. Everything was all up from here. A new base full of space, resources, and even living hoarders for members and stalkers. Very close to not only Malachite and the Duga, but also the Lesser Zone. A second faction war was going on at the time, though Iskra minded their own business while recruiting new members. Several new people joined Iskra, like Squint allegedly, and the Iskra faction has become a spiritual successor to the Ecologist faction, having way more experience in the zone and unbiased unlike those at Sirka. And at this period of the timeline, everything was moving like clockwork. Until one day, when the ward showed up. It isn't known when this happened, but we can assume that it happened a year or more before Heart of Chernobyl, as there still is a lot of bad blood between Stalkers and the ward due to this day. One day, the ward marched up to the chemical plant and demanded the Iskra faction to abandon this area, as the ward would be taking it for their own HQ. Those who didn't comply would be shown no mercy and killed immediately. The ward was pretty new at this time, and it was a horrible introduction for them to the Stalkers. A group of peaceful ecologist stalkers were threatened by the very thing they were sort of working for. The Iskra faction decided they were not going to back down. This was their hard-earned land and their dream. They weren't going to just hand it over to some quote-unquote zone cops. This didn't stop the ward, and the battle for the chemical plant had ensued. In the words of Scar and first-hand account from Marshall.
We kept to ourselves, minded our own business, even during that new faction war, until one day, bam, 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 Topol, he was the first to die. Mace tried to warn us. Over here! But all he could do was wheeze. Spirit and I tried to escape through the workshop, and then the second assault squad burst in. Boom! But Snake had a grenade ready for them. Thieves rule and wardens rule. Boom! And now tell me, who holds the chemical plant now?
The ward.
Yes, the ward.
To the victor go the spoils. Unfortunately, that victory had belonged to the ward. Most of Iskra was dead, massacred in what seemed to be a stalker genocide to the locals. The ward crusading and slaughtering and lining up stalkers to be killed. It was an incident that shook the zone, especially their leader, Topol's death really affecting the group. Several members disbanded, Squint leaving to the Lesser Zone, Spirit moving to the Red Forest and to Lemansk, Ozerski founding STC Malachite, and Herman joining Sirka. During this, Marshall had also disbanded from the faction, riddled with grief at his comrades being senselessly murdered in front of him. He wrote to Spirit. Marshall's last chat with Spirit. PDA taken from Marshall's body in the neuro laboratory.
That night at the chemical plant, it keeps coming back to me. Spirit, Spark, and our boys. Why did it have to happen? We ran to them as soon as we heard the first gunshot. Topol was the first to die, and I can still see it. Mace tried to warn us, but all he could do was wheeze. That fucking second assault squad, that workshop packed with barrels of chemicals. We wouldn't be talking right now if it weren't for Snake. Thieves rule, wardens drool, that's what he always said, remember? Of course I do. Just be careful. Don't defy Korshunov openly. Don't worry, I've got other ways to give him hell. I just don't want them to find you too. Don't worry, Spirit. I'll go north. The Ward won't find me there.
Marshall was never then seen or heard from again. A few people questioned his absence, though it was nothing new in the zone for someone to disappear. If only they knew who was about to take his place. Marshall's story doesn't end yet. This is where things begin to take a huge change. We don't know how, but somehow Marshall was abducted and turned into a sleeper agent of the C Consciousness and MDST. From there, his memory was manipulated. We can infer that either Marshall was brainwashed by the televisions in the neural laboratory, or that his hippocampus, a crucial part of the brain responsible for learning and stress regulation, emotional processing, and memory, was somehow surgically removed and placed into another agent's brain, the former being more likely. This other agent being brought into the picture was none other than the elusive Scar, marking the end of Marshall as he was left to rot in the neural laboratory, his purpose being fulfilled by MDST. With Scar now bearing the torch of all of Marshall's memories and beliefs, you'd expect him to be the same as him, right? That's where you would be wrong. To explain this, we must briefly explore the lore of Scar. We can start this with Scar's profile within the lab. File number 421. Nickname Scar / AMS-017. Year of birth 1979. Profile: a mercenary. Has natural resistance to anomalous energy and can survive emissions without any means of psi protection. 5th class psi resistance assumed. Intrinsic traits: stubborn, reckless, works well under pressure. Had Marshall's key memories implanted during his programming. Event reframe: the chemical plant / death of Spark group members. Obtained traits: strong interpersonal skills, exuberance, and hatred for the Ward. Warning: on the verge of nervous breakdown, could become unstable. Programming objective: reflection program. What isn't noted here is that Scar was a part of the Clear Sky faction back in 2011 and was secretly already a brainwashed agent, working in the great swamps of the zone at the time, where Lebedev and the rest of Clear Sky were keeping an eye on his behavior along with MDST. During that year, the entire Clear Sky faction, including Scar, pushed to the center of the zone to kill Strelok, who was too close. They all were then struck by an emission and were all indoctrinated into becoming agents or monolithians for C Consciousness, or died from the emission if lucky. Scar apparently stayed in stasis for several years awaiting assignment from MDST. Marshall came into the picture and Scar took his place. It should definitely be noted that the repeated brainwashings and missing of 2 personalities into one person's mind would be a recipe for an unstable person, especially one with a huge vendetta. He then went back out into the zone with the following orders from MDST on his PDA. Reframe instructions: locate an active alpha artifact or recruit a person to bring it to Circa and keep them under control. An alpha artifact is needed in X11 to restore the functionality of the X network. Use Orbita Station to recruit scientists. Assemble a working visiograph in STC Malachite X17 using modules found in the zone. Activate the visiograph, await further instructions. He then recruited the scientists at SCC Malachite to be on board with this plan, reconstructing Iskra to its former glory, sort of. A good event to explain this is Scar's interaction with Topol and Ozersky in Orbita Station. Here it is.
Why do you scientists always have to make things so complicated? Faith is about believing in spite of something, Mr. Ozeski, not because of it. Otherwise, what's the point?
I need to know for sure.
All right. If you prefer knowing to believing, see for yourself.
Well, I didn't expect to see a familiar face here. How's it going?
Topol? Is that really you?
Who else?
I want to make sure. Tell me this. During our time in the bunker, someone saved you and your crew from a controller. Who was it?
I'll never forget something like that. It was Degtyaryov.
You really are still alive. Unbelievable.
As you can see, Professor, faith is always rewarded. Are you ready to take action?
The group was reconstructed by Scar and officially known as Spark. While still using the Iskra patch, their official goal remained the same: carry out field research in the name of science and the good of mankind. Though their true ideology of that was long gone. Now just a front or facade, lying under the new view of the zone from Scar. Now it is not known when Scar's ideal view of the zone came into fruition, though it was likely placed into his mind during programming, as the visiograph in X-17 relays the same goal, that being the Shining Zone. By this point, we need to state something people are afraid to say out loud. By this point, Spark is no longer a humble group working to study the zone, but now a highly armed cult of ragtag soldiers working to achieve this new age of mankind, whether people have to suffer for it or not. We should also probably state that while the Shining Zone could probably be considered a religion by this point, we should also mention that with the existence of the Noosphere being proven in the franchise, this causes not only a lot of beliefs and ideologies to crumble, but now for the entire world to have its eyes and lives drawn into the zone and for what it could mean for life and mankind as a whole, reinventing the wheel for religion and belief outside. With that being said, several Stalkers were indoctrinated to the new Spark faction, and with the help of Scar's newfound quote-unquote interpersonal skills, it makes him a very convincing leader. By this point, Spark is no longer its former self. While retaining its connections to the scientists, it embarks on a new path, unfortunately, a trail of murder, suffering, and hostility. There are two main events before and during Heart of Chernobyl that Spark's conquest had an impact on, that being the second Caribbean experiment within Lab X11 in 2019, and the attack on the Duga in 2021 or 2022. Both times, Spark had intervened, which led into horrible consequences. These consequences being labeled as a terrorist organization by Sirka, the Ward, and the Ukrainian government, causing several artifacts to appear around the outside of the zone as this experiment failed, most notably in Skiff's laundry basket, causing one of the worst butterfly effects and cases of homelessness in history. The second event, zombifying every single Ward soldier invading the Duga, most being obedient, valuable, and good men that couldn't die in the honor or the respect they deserved while working for the Ward. All this proved that not only was Spark a force to be reckoned with, but that their leader Scar was becoming very unstable and bloodthirsty. If only he had knew that his hatred was artificial. By the end of the game, this goes in two directions depending on the player's choices. If you weren't completely on board with Scar, he learns of his brainwashing and artificial goals, where he then snaps into insanity, attempts to kill you, where he then meets his fate. Alternatively, if you had sided with Spark, you convince him that it was all not for nothing, and that in fact it's his destiny, where from there, he becomes a mediator for C Consciousness, stepping into the 8th pod and letting C Consciousness do its work and make the Shining Zone become reality. Or so it seems. After this, the whole zone becomes an oasis, where nobody is suffering, everyone's happy. That is until we come back into the real world. The whole zone's population is dying, as if a special psi emission was projected onto everyone living in the zone. This isn't a way of zombifying them, as the effects aren't as severe, though every single living human in the zone now constantly has eternal bliss and a euphoria-filled fever dream, while in reality, they twitch and squirm on the ground, reaching into the sky, imagining adventurers and Valhalla, and eventually starving to death. It seems some people on the ground are now dead, while some are still awake, most notably Skiff, sitting up having an energetic conversation with himself. This could imply that the effects are similar to the poppy field, as not only are there poppy fields all over this oasis in their minds, but several people in oases and the poppy field in Stalker 2 all slowly die by falling asleep and never waking up. This could also imply that those with natural psi resistance to psi field, whether it be little or not, would still be awake during this never-ending happiness. This stalker twitching on the ground could be fighting the urge to succumb to his drowsiness, while Skiff's exposure to the emissions and his strong suit from X7 protects him from this, and allows him to be full of energy during this facade. And from here, this story ends. So far, Spark's story comes into an end. If you hadn't sided with them, at the end they likely disband, as their forefathers, Clear Sky, once did. Now, let's quickly recap. Spark started out as Iskra with Topol as their leader in 2012. Marshall then joined the group and brought them to the chemical plant as their new base to inhabit. The first Spark group is formed, and they take on similar attire to their pseudo-ancestors, Clear Sky, with blue protective suits designed by Novikov. Then a few years later, the Ward pushes them out in an act of authority and bloodshed, causing Iskra to disband, and Marshall to go to the north, and somehow become an agent. Scar then takes on his memories and is sent out into the zone and brings Spark back together, but as a cult rather than amateur ecologists with guns. He is then ordered to bring the Shining Zone to fruition by C-Con and NDST. This causes two horrible incidents with severe consequences, where then the faction either succeeds or fails in 2021 or 2022. With all that being said, thank you for watching, Stalkers. If you want a more in-depth look into the lore of Spark, definitely check out Anomalous Dugout's video on the story of Spark and Scar. It's definitely worth a watch, and he has definitely done way better research than me. I will be opening up a Discord soon so that you can keep up with everything I am up to, including future videos where you can suggest topics, discuss more lore with me, or see some more of my work including cosplays or ARGs. Therefore, I hope you all enjoyed, and thanks for stopping by to watch Stalker 2 Mysteries, and I'll see you next time. Good hunting, Stalkers.